Okay, so you think Dollar General is just a cheap store, small aisles, plastic shelving, a faded yellow sign off a two-lane highway sitting next to a gas station and not much else. Nothing special, nothing worth a documentary. Here's the problem with that. Imagine opening a store in a town so small that Walmart won't even survey the land, and somehow turning that store into part of a $42.7 billion company. That's not a hypothetical. That's the literal business model, repeated across almost 21,000 locations. Most people assume this chain survives because everything inside it is cheap. That's only half the story, and it's the less important half. Dollar General isn't really competing with Walmart on price, on selection, or on square footage. It's competing with distance itself. A Walmart supercenter needs a trade area of 20 to 50,000 people within roughly 15 miles just to make the math work on a $10 million building. Dollar General turns a profit in towns with fewer than 3,000 residents. Towns most retailers wrote off decades ago. So the real secret isn't what's on the shelf, it's where the building sits. Every other number in this video traces back to that one decision. Meet Jay. L. Turner, a man who started out peddling goods door to door in rural Kentucky, decades before anyone had heard the phrase retail desert. He didn't invent the discount store. He wasn't the first to sell cheap goods to poor communities. What he built instead, alongside his son Cal Turner Sr., was a company willing to go where every other retailer assumed there was nothing left to sell. That single stubborn bet, building in the places everyone else considered unprofitable, is still to this day the entire foundation of the business. So how does a company built on selling to the poorest towns in America end up worth tens of billions of dollars? The answer isn't a clever product. It's a structural one, and it starts with geography. For the last 40 years, rural America quietly lost its retail infrastructure. Independent grocers closed under pressure from rising real estate costs and shrinking populations. Local pharmacies closed, regional department stores closed. One county at a time, huge stretches of the interior turned into what economists now formally call retail deserts and food deserts. Geographic zones where the nearest full grocery store might be 20 miles away. Most national retailers looked at that map and saw dead weight, low density, low ceiling. Not worth the real estate, Dollar General looked at the exact same map and saw an opening nobody else wanted. Here's the reversal that makes this whole strategy work. Traditional retail models treat low population as a hard limit on revenue. Dollar General treats it as an opportunity, because in a town with zero commercial competition, even a small population produces an extremely high capture rate on daily spending. There's nowhere else for that money to go, and the scale of this bet is enormous. Somewhere between 75 and 80% of Dollar General's roughly 20,893 stores sit in towns under 20,000 people. In a market that's small, there's no advertising war, no price-matching arms race, no competitor down the block eating into margin. The store simply becomes the only realistic option within a 10-minute drive, and customer acquisition cost drops close to zero, because the customer never really had a second choice to begin with. But why are these buildings so incredibly small compared to Walmart? A Walmart supercenter can run past 180,000 square feet. A typical Dollar General averages around 7,500, with newer formats stretching to about 8,500. That's not a compromise. That's the entire engine of the business. Run the two models side by side, and the gap is almost absurd. A supercenter stocks up to 140,000 different products and can require $10 million or more in upfront capital before the doors even open. A Dollar General stocks roughly 10,000 to 12,000 products and can be built for somewhere between $400,000 and $1 million. A supercenter might take 5 to 10 years to pay back that investment. A Dollar General location often does it in 2 years or less. Smaller buildings mean smaller everything else too. Lower utility draw, lower property taxes, lower insurance premiums, fewer maintenance contracts, less inventory sitting idle on shelves waiting to sell. None of that is glamorous, but stacked together, it collapses the break-even point down to a level almost no other national retailer can match at scale, and here's the number that makes it real. In fiscal 2025, Dollar General generated $42.7 billion in net sales, out of buildings roughly the footprint of a suburban drugstore. That's not a coincidence of geography. That's an engineered outcome, built one identical floor plan at a time. Small stores reduce costs. But that's only the beginning of the strategy. Dollar General almost never competes for expensive commercial real estate. No downtown storefronts, no premium mall leases, no bidding wars over corner lots in growing suburbs. Instead, it buys cheap land near a highway exit, a county road, or the edge of a residential neighborhood, land nobody else particularly wants. Then it builds the same building. Over and over again. Pre-engineered steel frame, concrete slab foundation, a standardized interior layout that a regional contractor can execute without reinventing anything. That repetition is what lets a contractor go from an empty field to a fully stocked, fully staffed store in 90 to 120 days. Now remember what I said about the capital requirement. $400,000 to $1 million is already lean compared to a supercenter. But here's where it gets more interesting. Dollar General usually doesn't even put up that money directly. Most new locations get built by independent developers through long-term net lease agreements. The developer buys the land, constructs the building to Dollar General's exact specifications, and leases the finished asset back to the company for years, sometimes decades. That keeps Dollar General's balance sheet light, its debt load manageable, and its capital free to fund the next wave of stores. Because each individual location recoups its investment within roughly 2 years, the cash generated by last year's cohort of new stores helps directly finance this year's cohort. It's a compounding flywheel. Cheap builds, fast paybacks, endless reinvestment, but opening thousands of stores like this is still expensive. Unless you've mastered a very specific expansion formula, here's where most retailers would make the obvious move. Take a profitable small store and turn it into a bigger one. Add departments. Chase the supercenter model that made Walmart the largest retailer on the planet. Dollar General does the exact opposite. It builds small, and it builds relentlessly. By early 2026, the company operated 20,893 stores across 48 states and into Mexico. In just 5 states, Texas, Georgia, Florida, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania, Dollar General runs more than 5,800 combined locations. That's a physical footprint larger than every single Walmart store in the entire United States. Combined, the math behind this decision is almost embarrassingly simple once you see it. A town of 4,000 people can comfortably support one profitable Dollar General. It cannot support 2. So Dollar General gets there first. It spaces new locations 3 to 5 miles apart, and in doing so, it quietly closes the door on any future competitor who might have wanted that exact same market. This isn't really an expansion strategy in the traditional sense. It's a saturation strategy, flooding a region with small, cheap, fast-to-build stores before anyone else even considers showing up. There's also a behavioral piece nobody talks about enough. Once a store sits 3 minutes from someone's front door, shopping stops being a planned event and starts being a reflex. Customers routinely choose not to drive 20 minutes to save 50 cents on laundry soap when a nearby store solves the problem immediately. Now comes the most misunderstood part of the entire business. Here's the assumption almost every customer walks in with. Everything at Dollar General is a deal, and on the receipt it often looks that way. A $4 bottle of detergent feels like a clear win compared to a $15 jug at a warehouse club 40 minutes away. But here's the catch, and it's a significant one. Dollar General frequently works directly with major consumer goods manufacturers to shrink the package size before a product ever reaches the shelf. That same detergent might arrive in an 8-ounce bottle instead of a standard 24-ounce one. The sticker price drops from $15 to $2.50, but run the actual unit math. That 8-ounce bottle can work out to roughly 31 cents per ounce, compared to about 21 cents per ounce for the bulk version. That's a markup of nearly 50%, hidden behind a smaller, friendlier-looking number on the shelf tag. This isn't a packaging accident. It's a deliberate read on how the target customer actually shops. Someone with $10 left until their next paycheck isn't comparing long-term unit economics. They're comparing what physically fits in their wallet today. Dollar General built an entire pricing architecture around that single constraint, the gap between what something costs over time and what a customer can actually afford to hand over right now. That gap is where a meaningful slice of the company's margin quietly lives. Run the math across a whole basket, not just one bottle of detergent. A customer buying 5 small format staples at Dollar General might spend $14 total at the register. The same 5 products, bought in bulk at a supermarket 30 minutes away, might only cost $11 combined. That's a $3 premium. But it also means the customer never had to burn 40 minutes of round-trip driving, never had to pay for the gas, and never had to come up with $11 in one single outlay instead of spreading it across a week. The premium isn't a trick played on an unaware shopper. It's the price of liquidity. And Dollar General is one of the only companies in American retail that prices it explicitly. If you're finding this breakdown useful so far, this is a good moment to hit subscribe and like the video. It genuinely helps a channel like this keep going. So if the products themselves aren't always the cheapest option available, where does the real profit actually come from? Nobody does a big weekly shop at Dollar General. That's simply not what the store is designed for. It's an emergency stop. The milk ran out. The batteries died. Someone needs cold medicine at 9 at night and doesn't want to drive 20 minutes for it. That kind of trip changes everything about how a customer behaves once they're inside. A quick, urgent visit doesn't leave room for careful comparison shopping. It leaves room for impulse. A customer walks in for a carton of eggs and walks out having also grabbed a seasonal candle, a phone charger, and a bag of chips they hadn't planned on buying 20 minutes earlier. Here's the number that makes this section actually land. Consumables, the milk, the medicine, the household basics make up about 82% of Dollar General's total sales, and they carry the thinnest margins in the entire store. Seasonal items, home goods, and apparel make up a much smaller share of revenue, roughly 18% combined, but they carry a dramatically higher margin. The essentials are what pull people through the door on a Tuesday night. The impulse buys sitting next to the register are what actually pay for the lights, the trucks, and the corporate headquarters. And the labor costs sitting underneath all of this are even more fascinating. Walk into a mid-sized supermarket, and you'll typically see somewhere between 15 and 40 employees on a single shift, spread across specialized departments. Walk into a Dollar General during a slow weekday afternoon, and you might see exactly one person running the entire building, ringing up customers, restocking shelves, and unloading freight, all at once. That's not an exaggeration for effect. Across roughly 194, 500 employees covering more than 20,800 stores, the average location runs on approximately 9.3 total workers, including part-timers and the store manager. For long stretches of any given day, that number on the floor can drop to 1 or 2 people handling everything simultaneously. Sounds efficient. It is. Thin staffing keeps payroll expenses suppressed, and that keeps each store's break-even threshold remarkably low, even in towns with only a few thousand residents to draw from. But here's the trap hiding underneath that efficiency, and it's a real one. Understaffed stores routinely end up with blocked aisles, unsorted freight pallets, slower restocking, and hourly turnover rates that can exceed 100% in a single year. It's also drawn direct regulatory attention. Federal safety penalties tied to blocked emergency exits and workplace hazards have topped $25 million. And inventory shrink, product loss to theft, damage, and administrative error has climbed to roughly 3.5% of total sales, an estimated $1.5 billion annual hit. In response, the company has started reinvesting in store-level labor hours under what it calls its Back to Basics initiative. Lean staffing built this empire. It's also the first real crack starting to show underneath it. The inventory strategy sitting on top of all that labor is just as unconventional. A Walmart supercenter carries up to 140,000 distinct products. 15 brands of ketchup, 20 sizes of paper towels, a dozen competing detergents fighting for the same 3 feet of shelf space. Dollar General carries roughly 10,000 to 12,000 total SKUs, often just 1 or 2 leading national brands per category, alongside a cheaper private label alternative. Sounds like a limitation. It's actually the entire point of the design. Fewer products means faster, simpler restocking. Faster restocking means lower labor hours per delivery. Fewer choices for the customer means faster checkout and less decision fatigue at the shelf. And here's the number that really moves the needle on profitability. Private label products now make up roughly 30% of total sales volume, and they carry 10 to 12 additional percentage points of margin compared to equivalent national brands. Every single square foot inside that 7,500 square foot box is working harder because there's simply less clutter competing for a customer's attention and a company's shelf space. There's a second, quieter benefit here too. Concentrating purchase volume across a narrow set of SKUs hands Dollar General serious leverage over the manufacturers it buys from. A supplier negotiating shelf space in a supercenter is competing against a dozen rival brands for the same square foot. A supplier negotiating with Dollar General is often negotiating for one of only 2 slots in an entire category, across nearly 21,000 stores at once. That leverage shows up directly in the price Dollar General pays per unit, long before any of it ever reaches a customer. But keeping 20,000 tiny stores like this constantly supplied is its own separate economic miracle. Here's a problem most customers never think about. If your stores are small, your backrooms are small too, often less than 20% of the total building. There's simply nowhere to stockpile extra inventory for a bad week. Everything has to arrive constantly, in exactly the right quantity, almost exactly on schedule. Dollar General solved this by building its own distribution network largely from scratch, including a cold chain initiative called DG Fresh. Before that program existed, the company leaned on third-party distributors for anything refrigerated or frozen, which limited how much fresh food it could realistically offer. After building internal cold chain infrastructure, Dollar General expanded fresh produce into more than 5,000 stores, with plans pushing that number towards 7,000 and beyond. AI-driven ordering systems now predict, store by store, exactly how much of a given product will sell in a given week, triggering automatic restocking before a shelf ever actually goes empty. Without this system running quietly in the background, the entire small store model simply collapses under its own logistics. The stores are only able to stay this small because the trucks genuinely never stop moving. Think about what that actually requires at scale. Nearly 21,000 stores, most of them without meaningful backroom storage, spread across rural roads that a standard 18-wheeler sometimes can't even navigate efficiently. Regional distribution centers have to route trucks in tight, overlapping loops, servicing clusters of small stores on the same trip, instead of dedicating a full truck to a single location the way a supercenter might. Shave a few miles off each route, multiply that across thousands of weekly deliveries, and the fuel savings alone become a meaningful line item on the annual budget. The stores look simple from the parking lot. The system feeding them is anything but. Then something unexpected happened during the recent stretch of inflation. Most retailers' dread of recession. Falling consumer confidence usually means falling sales. Dollar General, in a strange and counterintuitive way, tends to benefit from exactly that environment. Here's the mechanism behind it. When inflation rises, households earning somewhere between $50,000 and $75,000 a year start feeling real pressure on their budgets. To protect themselves, a portion of them trade down, leaving traditional supermarkets and department stores for discount chains they might have skipped entirely in better times. Meanwhile, Dollar General's core existing customer base, households earning under $35,000 to $40,000 annually, tighten spending even further onto pure essentials, which keeps foot traffic elevated regardless of how the broader economy is performing. The result is one of retail's strangest paradoxes. During fiscal 2025, a stretch marked by persistently elevated inflation, Dollar General grew net sales by 5.2%, reaching that $42.7 billion figure, with same-store sales climbing 3% on top of that. While plenty of national retailers were quietly bracing for a rough year, Dollar General was actively adding customers it simply didn't have 12 months earlier. But success on this scale doesn't come without real backlash, and this part of the story deserves to be told honestly. Here's where the story gets uncomfortable, and it needs to be told straight, without softening it. Researchers at the USDA and the Agricultural and Applied Economics Association have specifically tracked what happens after a Dollar General opens near an existing independent grocery store. The probability that grocer closes within a few years rises by 3% nationwide, and in rural census tracts specifically, that added risk is roughly 3 times higher. Nearby grocery stores see average sales fall by 9.2% following a Dollar General opening close by, and local grocery employment in that same area falls by around 7.1%. Here's the actual mechanism driving those numbers, laid out step by step. A small independent grocer typically survives on razor-thin margins of just 1 to 2%, propped up almost entirely by higher-margin packaged goods, the paper towels, the snacks, the soda, that subsidize the much lower margins on fresh meat and produce. When a Dollar General opens nearby, it captures a meaningful chunk of exactly those high-margin packaged sales. Deprived of the category that was quietly keeping it afloat, the grocer's fresh food operation stops being financially viable, and eventually the store closes for good. Follow that sequence all the way through. First, the packaged goods sales erode. Then the margin cushion that was subsidizing meat and produce disappears with it. Then the grocer either drops fresh food entirely or shuts down completely. And finally, the town is left exactly where it started decades earlier. Except now there isn't even an independent grocer left to fill the gap if someone tried. That's not a one-time event. It's a slow structural shift that critics argue repeats itself, town after town, every time this exact pattern plays out. Because Dollar General's classic small box format historically lacks a full produce section or a meat counter, the town is frequently left with less fresh food access afterward, not more. More than 70 local governments have already passed zoning restrictions specifically aimed at slowing this exact pattern down. Supporters of the model see it differently, and their argument deserves airtime too. Many of these towns had already lost their grocery store years before Dollar General ever showed up. In those cases, the company isn't displacing a healthy local business, it's often the only retailer still willing to serve that community at all, providing jobs, tax revenue, and basic necessities where nothing else remains. Both of these things can be true at the same time, which is exactly what makes this debate so genuinely difficult to resolve. Which raises one final question about where all of this actually goes from here. As Dollar General closes in on 21,000 domestic locations, the easy growth is starting to run out. There are only so many small towns left to build in before the map itself becomes the limiting factor. So the strategy is visibly shifting. New store openings have slowed to roughly 450 a year, a sharp pullback from the over 1,000-a-year pace of prior expansion. In their place, the company is pouring capital into remodeling around 4,250 existing stores annually, adding expanded coolers, fresh produce sections, and beauty aisles under initiatives called Project Elevate and Project Renovate, squeezing more revenue out of buildings it already owns rather than chasing new ground. A suburban spin-off called Pop Shelf, aimed at higher-income shoppers with household incomes up to $125,000, underperformed badly enough that management halted new construction entirely and closed 45 underperforming locations in 2025 alone. On the digital side, the MyDG app and delivery partnerships with DoorDash and Instacart now get more than 80% of online orders to a customer's door in under an hour, directly defending the proximity advantage that built the company in the first place. And in late 2025, Dollar General opened its first 15 stores in Mexico under the Mi Super Dollar General banner, with 10 more planned for 2026, testing whether this exact rural playbook can actually travel beyond American borders. None of these moves are expansion for its own sake. Every one of them is a company protecting the single advantage that got it here, and quietly admitting that the old growth engine can't run forever on its own. The answer to that question reveals what Dollar General was actually selling this entire time. So let's put all of it together. Dollar General is usually described as a discount chain. Cheap products for people who supposedly can't afford anything better. That description was never quite accurate, and by now you know exactly why. It builds in towns nobody else will touch, and it profits from the distance itself. It shrinks its packaging, and it profits from a customer's cash constraints, not their actual preferences. It runs stores with a skeleton crew, and it profits from the labor cost it never has to pay in the first place. It stocks a fraction of what a supermarket carries, and it profits from the simplicity that creates for both the customer and the supply chain behind it. None of that is really about being cheap. It's about being close, being fast, and being there when a $5 bill is genuinely all a customer has left until Friday. A shopper who pays $4 for a small bottle of detergent instead of driving 20 miles for a $15 bulk pack isn't making a mistake. They're making a deliberate trade, accepting a higher per ounce cost in exchange for saved time, saved gas money, and cash they don't have to spend all at once. Dollar General built a $42.7 billion company on the back of that single quiet trade-off, repeated millions of times a week, in towns most of the country has genuinely never heard of. So the next time you drive past one of those small yellow and black stores, sitting just off the highway, remember what you're actually looking at. Not a discount chain in the way most people picture one. A company that figured out, earlier and more precisely than almost anyone else in retail, that being close enough to matter beats being cheap almost every single time. Before you go, it's worth mentioning that the kind of detailed business breakdowns you just watched, the real numbers, the underlying strategy, the full mechanics behind how companies like this actually operate, are laid out in a comprehensive guide linked down in the description and pinned in the very first comment. Well worth a look if you want to go deeper than any single video can realistically take you. And that's the complete picture behind Dollar General. If you enjoyed this one, please do consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. It makes a real difference for a channel this size. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.